Hi all, welcome to the channel, welcome to the workshop. Happy Monday everyone. Yes, it's Monday and we've got the Mallard again. We've got issue 45 today. I'm saying issue 45 because I'm probably only going to be doing this one issue because there are several points in the instructions where it says, this is fiddly, take your time. So you know that's going to make it even worse. So we have got the body up, as you can see. What we're working on today are the front buffers. So we got about 4 tiny springs and a couple of brackets to make. Doesn't sound like a lot, but as I said, the instructions say it's fiddly. So let's get into it. Let's get building. Right, so issue 45 of the Mallards, as I said. And as you can see, we do have the buffers. These are obviously what we worked on previously. I've grabbed these from issue 29, along with the shafts and the springs. But we do have a fret here. And what we're doing, we're just doing a little bit of folding and then making this little sub-assembly. We're not actually using that sub-assembly this time. We're just going to put that to one side. What we are interested in are the parts here. Now this is forming the rear side of the buffers. And you can see where we've got to put the little shanks in there. And then we need to take this, put this little disc in. We might need to cut off a little bit of this to get this to fit in the bottom here properly. And then we've asked to put some epoxy on here to make it really strong. But we've then got to put the spring in. We've then got the spring here, and we're going to make sure that actually functions. But then we've asked to remove it, take the springs out, and put those to one side. So basically they're not in there for painting. So this is just effectively fitting that piece and the piece we're going to create today. Now, it doesn't seem like a lot, as I said, but there's probably at least 3 times in this magazine, I think, that it says that it's going to be fiddly. So we shall see. Today we've got the Mallard story, and we've got Britain's Railways. So only a small fret today. And the first bits we're going to be needing are these. That piece. And this piece. As usual, just going to clean them up with a little bit of emery paper. Right, so those parts are cleaned up. We'll need that part in a moment, but the first part we need is this one. Now, you can probably just about see that there is a small groove just there. Now that indicates we need to fold this square part 90 degrees over this side. And then on the other side, we've got 2 vertical grooves. Now we need to bend both these little arms around this little V shape. So, as I say, the first thing we need to do is just bend this one at 90 degrees. So that's looking like that. And then I'm just going to bend these arms now. And we also need to bend them fairly evenly. And then this will sit just in there. And the way to do it, as I say, put it on your bench. And we just shape these around. Like so. So we've got a small gap at the top there. We want it flush to the bottom of this. And then we're just going to put a little bit of glue along there, along the edges, make sure that's glued in place. So just running a little bit of super glue down the edge. Also, we don't want this sticking to the workbench, so don't need it too heavy. And that is what that is looking like. So just going to put that to one side because we don't actually need that anymore. What we now need are these parts. And we're going to be making up 2 of these. Right, so that's those parts cut out and all cleaned up. Now the first thing we're going to be doing is shaping these parts. And to do that, I'm just going to use my needle nose pliers. And we've got grooves on this side, and we've got grooves on this side. And the first thing we're going to be doing is bending this end one back on itself, like so. And then bending this up. So we have something that looks like that. We're also going to bend this one back. And just making sure that it is 90 degrees to the main part of this. Like so. Now, what we need to do, we need to get one of these little discs. And you'll see that it's got a groove side and a non-groove side. We want the groove side to be facing up, and we need to put it in this little slot. We also need to put it in this slot. So we need to capture that when we fold this up. Right, so with these little circular bits, we need to place them in the slots. Now, that's probably going to be easier said than done. We basically need to put that one in there, and then whilst that's in there, fold this piece up over and capture it. Now, I think the only way I can see it doing that is just to dip this edge into some glue, glue it loosely in that slot, and then fold the other piece up. Now, when we do this, we need to make sure this grooved side is facing out, and the other side is just flat. Right, so I've just put that in some glue to sort of tack it in place. And then we need to fold this piece up and just capture that other piece. While still trying to keep everything straight. It's difficult to say the least. So that's looking just like that. I'm just going to hold it for a sec and put a little bit of glue along the edges of here and here. And just leave that for a minute while it sets. Just a note, one thing I haven't shown you is these circular pieces, you do need to make sure that they're open enough that this buffer will run through it, like that. Now, I did have to open mine up with a file, so that's just something worth noting and checking beforehand. Right, so that one's in there, that's sorted. Need to do the exact same thing for the other one. Now, I have done this one a little bit differently to the instructions. I've bent up both of these at the same time, knowing how difficult it was to try and get that one straight and then actually try and bend this other one up. So that's what all I've done differently, but I'm just going to now capture this piece in there like I did with the other ones. Hold that for a sec for one of the glue sets. Right, so we're now turning our attention to the loco body, and we're going to take these shafts. Now, I have discovered a small problem. This one, if I take the buffer head and the shaft, you can see that it goes all the way through. This one currently does not. It only allows that little threaded part to come through. So I need to open up this one a little bit to allow that to go all the way through. So I'll do that one in a minute. But I'll show you one, and it'll be the same process for the other one. So we need to put that in there. We need to put the buffer head into there and make sure that comes all the way through. And then taking one of the brackets that we've just created, we need to make sure that those holes line up with the buffer head itself, or the pin. So that'll just go in there. Now we are told that we might need to trim off a little bit of that curved section, and in this case it looks like I do, because that won't go all the way to the front. So this is going to need a little bit of fettling and fiddling, and this is one of those points where they said this takes a little bit of fiddle. This is going to be a little bit fiddly, so take your time. So all I'm going to do is just take off a little bit at a time with assembly board, and then just continue trying and fitting. I don't mind telling you, but that is an absolute pain to do. So instructions tell you to put this cylinder in here. Nice and simple, easy enough. They then also want you to put the buffer in like so, also fairly simple, and then shape this to fit in and thread that buffer through, so that buffer will move through that disc that we put in earlier. Now that's fairly simple and quite easy to do. However, what they then want you to do is, in the tiny gap that they leave you, they want you to insert this spring. Now, if I tried doing that, and I did, I'm sure it would probably end up halfway across the workshop and never be found again. Now, they then want you to remove this spring after the fact, so that you can remove all the sections for painting. Now, what I plan on doing, and what I've done on this one, I've basically just assembled the buffer as is. So what I've done, now I'm going to show you how I've done it, in case you are at this point as well and want to do the same, because this makes more sense to me personally. Assemble the buffer, so with that tiny spring on there, going to place that in as we normally would. So that'll give us a little tiny bit of spring immersion, a little bit of spring tension on there. Going to place the larger spring on there now, and then take this piece, after you've fettled it and fitted it, over the back of that buffer and compressing that spring, which, as you can see, is still a little bit difficult to do, especially when it wants to fall down inside the boiler. So that will go over there, as the instructions do tell you. Just got to find that hole for it to go into. Now, if you just hold that in place, if that works, then what I've done, I've taken the little tiny nut which you're probably not going to see in my fingers. And I've put that on the back of the buffer. So that then held it in place. I've then compressed it all up, held it all up, and then I've used this UV resin, which is instant cure, to hold it all in place. So theoretically, I could still remove that buffer, but I'm definitely not removing the spring or anything else associated with this. So now it's still fiddle, but less of a fiddle. So I'm not going to film it because I know this is probably going to take me the best part of half an hour to try and get that all lined up. So when I come back, this will be done. Right, there we are. So just to show you, those buffers are now in, and you can see that they are all in there. And so I've just used this 30-second, UV cure resin, which is an absolute godsend for that. I probably will reinforce this with the 5-minute resin, just to make sure that is a really good strong bond. Now, if you're probably doing this as a running model, you probably want to reinforce that some other way, obviously because you're going to be constantly hitting those buffers. But yeah, they do, as I say, work and spring. But absolute nightmare. And what I'll do when it comes to painting this, I'll just mask off the bits that I don't want painted, and then I'll paint them individually. So, and it's probably so they work, is why I'm being told to remove them before painting, because obviously if you get paint in there, they're just going to stick up anyway. So I'll just paint them with a brush. But that is all there is to do in that stage. And what a stage it was. Thank you very much for watching. I do hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, please remember to give a big thumbs up. So, now I'm sure after editing, I've no idea at the minute, that this is probably going to seem like a very short video. We've only made that bracket. We've only put those 2 buffers in. But recording has probably been the best part of 2 hours. That is how fiddly that was to do. Now, obviously, I've done it differently to the instructions. I've built them up to the best of my knowledge, and as far as I can see, that is how they go, with that little nut on the end and all the springs in place. Obviously, if you are building along with me, I know someone is at very least, then I highly recommend, depending on how you're running your model, to probably do it the way I've done it, and put those in now, or just not do it and then wait until you're at the painting stage and then you can assemble that, because that was really, really fiddly to do. And I highly recommend something like this UV cure resin, where you just put it in, touch it, UV resin it, and then it's cured there and then, and it just holds it in place right away. The good thing is, obviously, with that stuff is you can position it until you hit it with the UV light. So something like that was really easy to do, or really good to use with that. Certainly was not easy, but it meant I could move the bracket around, and as soon as I got it in the right place where those buffers would actually move in and out, just hit it with the UV and it was done. I have since reinforced it a little bit more with a bit more of that UV resin, but I'll probably put a little bit of the epoxy resin on there as well, just to make sure they're not going to move anymore. But I'm certainly not disassembling that again, and I will just paint around it. If you want to see more of how Mallard progresses or anything else that goes on in the workshop, please do remember to hit the subscribe button and ding that bell, and then you'll be notified when I release new videos, and it really does help the channel out. Until the next time, I'll see you around. Cheers.